My name is TJ Scandaliato. I'm a special agent with the Diplomatic Security Service. Currently serve on the Secretary of State's Protective Detail. I graduated from Rockefeller last May. I was on the part-time track. It took me 4 years, but glad to be with you and looking forward to chatting.
I'll go next. I'm Madeleine Goodman, and I graduated from Rockefeller's MIA program in May 2021. And I am currently in the U.S. Government Office of Personnel Management as a diversity program specialist. And Rockefeller just helped me get here because I learned about the Presidential Management Fellowship, which I've applied to, and now I am a PMF here in the federal government. So Rockefeller helped me kind of find various fellowships that got me to where I am currently.
Thank you.
Simone, over to you, please.
Simone, over to you.
We'll have these together, so I see you're putting me on the spot. Hi everyone, my name is Simone Grant. I am a section chief with USCIS in the Department of Homeland Security. When TJ said he was with DSS, I was going to ask if you were down the hall because I'm in our Manhattan office and DSS is literally just down the hall. I graduated from UAlbany the first time with a bachelor's in 2005. And then I came back for the PhD and I graduated in 2012. So Rockefeller, how did it prepare me? I mean, both times, I think it set me up for a lot of the stuff that we deal with here. It's not unfamiliar, some of the things that we run into as bureaucrats, as administrators, et cetera. But also, it gave me a unique perspective, and I think I've been able to navigate within my career a lot better with tools gained in my time at Rockefeller.
Excellent. Thanks, Simone.
Okay, so I go last. My name is Mohammed Abbadi. I'm the Senior Investment Manager with the United Nations Capital Development Fund. And I graduated with my MPA from Rockefeller back in 2008. And it was really a phenomenal experience that opened my mind on public financial management and public administration that really helped me now to really become one of the UN's experts in local development and local financial management, and most importantly on investments and infrastructure development around the world. So it's really a great pleasure to be with you all on this panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I will kick it off with a question, but like I said, I am strongly encouraging student questions tonight so that you can all have your questions answered. But I will kick it off with, can you talk a little bit about each of your current roles, you know, the benefits, the challenges, but also what are some of the skills and knowledges that you gained, you know, throughout your career as well that you found helpful? It's kind of a two-part question. And whoever wants to dive in first. I hate to pick on people.
Yes, Peter. I keep moving the phone because the signal in this building is really bad. So could you just repeat the first part of your question? I didn't hear it.
Sure. So if you can all talk a little bit about your current role, some of the benefits, some of the challenges, and maybe some of the skills that you've gained so far throughout your career.
Since I'm off mic, I'll talk. Just
Sounds great. Thank you.
Skills. Because I was messing up and couldn't find the actual mute button, so that's what happened. Skills that were gained. So, you know, as part of Rockefeller, being a part of Rockefeller College, one of the things that, you know, it's uncomfortable, but learning to network and gain some of the in-person, you know, taking advantage of the location where you are in Albany, because you are, you know, right there with our state government, and engaging in some of the activities that might feel initially uncomfortable, taking advantage of any scholarships, any fellowships, any opportunities to do work in government, if that's where you'd like to work, or if it's in the nonprofit sector, working with nonprofits. Those are the kinds of skills that I realized help me today, being cognizant of the circumstances and the situations that surround me. It also, I think, made me, I felt armed with my degree coming from Rockefeller. I don't, forgive me, I don't know where we are on the list anymore. But when we were there, I think we were like number 11, right up there with the American University. And I felt good. I felt very strong when I applied to any positions, and I felt good about having a degree coming from Rockefeller College. So when I went into different circumstances, people understood that this was the education I had received at Rockefeller was a strong one. You have challenges. I think just being realistic. I have a background, obviously, in international relations and international development. I did do some work with, I did an internship with the United Nations. I had reached out to Mohammed back, that's like 10 years ago now, looking back. Or actually more than that, like 12 years ago, that time. And it was also very useful to me.
It's okay. It looks like Simone cut out briefly due to the probably technical issues. So would anyone else want to jump in? Some of the benefits and challenges you've experienced in your career, some of the skills that have been helpful that you've utilized?
Sure, I'll go ahead, go next. So I think I think in terms of skills that I gained from my time at Rockefeller, obviously getting to dive deeper into my interest in foreign affairs and really cultivate that knowledge, but also collaborating on projects with other students, both in person and figuring out how to collaborate once I moved across the country, digitally, public speaking, debating skills, learning how to articulate an argument in a respectful way, and be able to back up your points. And, that's kind of one of those things where we may not get formal training on it, but Rockefeller was a great laboratory for that and really gave me the opportunity to kind of figure that out and try new tactics, and was definitely part of my success. And then just generally leadership, and that's everything from taking a stance in class in an argument or leading a project, right? Everybody's kind of, I think, especially earlier on, people can be timid to want to jump into those sorts of positions, but somebody's got to do it, right? And then the more you do it, the more you figure out what you like and don't like, and you kind of learn by doing. So those are some of the benefits of the program. And they all kind of directly translate into my current role, where I'm often negotiating with host nation governments all over. When the secretary travels, I either travel with him or ahead of him. And if I'm traveling ahead of him, that means that I'm part of a team that's preparing his security arrangements and working with the host nation government to kind of figure out how things are going to work and flow and what assets we have. So all of those skill sets directly kind of pipe into that.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, did I hit everything?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah.
Madeleine, Mohammed, do you want to add on to that and the skills or experiences that you gained throughout the program that you found helpful in your career, how that translated?
Go ahead, Madeleine.
All right. Yeah, I guess for me, Rockefeller really helped me with interning and gaining an understanding of government operations. So I interned in a legislative office, as well as interned on a New York City Council campaign during my time at Rockefeller. So I would definitely say like those two experiences helped me just not only understand city and state operations, but just bureaucracy in general, which is really good to know how just bureaucracy impacts everything in all levels of government. And also just as Simone kind of like talked about, networking. Definitely use this time to kind of like do informal interviews with other alum or with other people in fields that you're interested in, and just kind of like learn how to hold conversations with people and just show your strengths and your weaknesses, and just really use this time to just kind of like experiment and try to figure out what are your interests in your career, what kind of job are you looking for? Do you want a job in Western US, or do you want a job abroad, or like do you want a job with certain type of people? So my time at Rockefeller allowed me to really just network and intern in different areas to kind of figure out Do I want to work in government or do I want to work in nonprofit? So that's kind of like the experience aspect of what I've kind of learned and has guided me to where I am currently. And then also just like benefits and challenges in my role. So Rockefeller helped me with really learning statistical analysis. I'm on the data team within my office. And so like learning just not only how to use Excel, but a little bit about R and Stata and just kind of like apply that to my current position has been really beneficial to be able to carry that on from grad school and just kind of also assist my coworkers with how to do statistical analysis, how to present it to different audiences, and just how to continue to make sure the data is being maintained well. So those are like benefits, challenges of my time of what I've learned from Rockefeller. So Mohammed, go ahead.
Okay, so I mean, look, I want to start the other way around by the challenges first. I mean, where I sit, the world is really facing massive, let's say, mega crises that are happening in so many different places around the world, whether it's conflict, whether it's you know, across borders, whether it is national conflicts, but there's also a bigger climate crisis going on. There's an energy crisis. There's food insecurity crisis that are continuously increasing, and more really impacting people's lives and their livelihoods. There are droughts that are happening. And at the same time, there's an increased level of inequalities and gender discrimination that are being witnessed right and left. And so, you know, it comes to a status where there's a lot of pressure at the United Nations right now to try to make a difference, to try to step in, to try to bring in you know, stability with governments, with you know, trying to get countries and the private sector, the people, the citizens, you know, stick together, stick to a message of hope and peace and stability, as well as, you know, a message maybe of economic prosperity if there is better collaboration, coordination. So it is really tough, I would say, to be at the UN right now, and it's very challenging, especially that there are shortages of funds. And in many countries around the world, you see a huge increase in gap in poverty. And a lot of countries are actually falling way behind in terms of the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. And there is very shortage of capital that is being provided to them to just meet the most basic needs. And at the same time, you see waves of urbanization, waves of youth population that in, you know, probably like, you know, 20, 30 years from now, the majority of the current, you know, young people will be entering their labor market, and guess what? There are not enough jobs to secure that. So what's going to happen to the world, right? That's how you need to think about it. But there are, of course, opportunities for collaboration, and this is where I think my specific career right now, what I do at the UN is so of huge critical advantage. And what I have really gained in terms of skills from the public economics and public financial management, public policy, kind of putting them together, that really unique skill set of let's say knowledge, but also practical knowledge that I gained at Rockefeller gave me the foundation to start thinking creatively and to start to address real solutions that are tangible and where you can crowd in partners to start to tackle some of those challenges. Most importantly, in how to increase the capital flows and financing to the least developed countries, to developing countries, low-income countries, in areas of development where it's needed most, whether it's in basic services, in infrastructure, whether it's in you know, recovery from disasters, etc. So these are, you know, first things is the educational aspects, but the second thing is that I also gained amazing friends from Rockefeller, and these have been my backbone for so many years now. I graduated in 2008, and these are my brothers. These are my, you know, my close friends and sisters here in New York and other places that I'm still in touch with. And sometimes you need that back to lean on, or someone to just kind of put you brainstorm with. And I have to say, everyone who graduated from that program are people I respect because they have the intelligence. We all graduate from the same program, and there are people I bounce ideas with all the time. And that also is a major strength. And the third is the fact that, with humbly, of course, I maintained a close relationship with Rockefeller over the years, and I have, continued to engage with the student body and the MPA class now for quite some time through maybe a capstone program that was running for 3 years, which I hope to bring back again end of this year. And that was really great because it provides you fresh ideas, which are really useful sometimes, and young ideas, which are really critical sometimes, and impactful ideas, which we can, then take and put to scale somewhere else. So I stop here, but this is my reflection.
Thank you so much. So I'm gonna jump to the student questions so we have enough time for everything. I see you, Patrick. I'm just gonna ask one in the chat first, and then I'll get over to you. We have 2 students who asked similar questions, basically surrounding, we have here, how did your career aspirations when entering your program differ from when you ended up graduating? It's similar to what David had asked too, about if you knew where you wanted to work when you started. So yeah, I want to pose that question. How did your career aspirations when entering your program differ from when you ended up graduating?
I always laugh about this one. I actually really enjoy this question because I thought I was going to be a diplomat. I knew for a fact that I was going to go to the Department of State, and that's where I would end up. In fact, you see, I work in immigration, and I think I took 1 course in all my years at Albany on immigration, and that is not at all what I thought I would do. When I graduated from Rockefeller, I was still an intern at the United Nations in ECOSOC, working with the NGO branch because I had studied civil society development as part of my doctorate at Rockefeller. And so that's where I was focused. But I applied sort of off the cuff for an immigration officer position just because, working for the UN for free was only going to last for so long. And I took position, fully recognizing that I wanted to turn international, and that's where I wanted to go. I wanted to go outwards, and I would also still continue to try to get into the Department of State. So I stuck with being an ISO and immigration services officer for a while. And through networking, actually at that time, I think I did reach out to other former alum from Rockefeller as I was looking for opportunities. And I ended up landing a detail in the Department of State. And so I was working at the United States mission to the UN for a few months as well. So I ended up getting some of the things that I wanted. And while I was in the program that allowed me to do that, I learned about all these incredible positions within the government that I would never even think of. So things that there are people that have jobs that you can't even imagine. Like somebody who would have to make sure, similar to TJ's job, that things are set for someone who's coming into the country that actually ideally would like them to get out of the country before we realize they're in the country. There's just so many things. So I would say one of the things that I would advise is reclaim that phrase, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up, and be open to the possibility. Because I definitely now, section chief in asylum was not that. I didn't know there was a section chief in asylum when I started. And so I would say keep that levity.
Excellent. Couldn't agree more. Anyone else want to dive in on this one?
Sure, I will. I mean, I came into the program knowing that I wanted to do this job, but the path was obscure. It wasn't clear, and so through the program, I made a bunch of friends, and one of those friendships actually turned into a job, which 2 jobs later led me to where I am now. So I'm happily right where I want to be. But I do remember, especially in my earlier years at Rockefeller, kind of just sitting there like, how am I going to achieve this? Like, other people that I knew in diplomatic security were former special operations folks or had, lots of law enforcement experience. And I had worked in emergency management and cybersecurity. I'd been a teacher and I worked in sales. And I was like, how is that all going to tie together?
Yeah.
And then just, by again, another point from Mohammed, kind of like bouncing things off of people and kind of dreaming together a little bit. You know, things started to come together and to give way, and it all kind of created a pathway to where I am now. So
Yeah. Excellent.
For me, so I have my undergrad is history and Chinese language, so that kind of pointed me towards the State Department as a diplomat, similar to Simone again. So I entered Rockefeller wanting to go into State Department as a diplomatic officer. But upon graduating, I actually got accepted into the Excelsior Service Fellowship, which is a New York State fellowship program. And so I actually am still in Albany. I worked for about 2.5 years in New York State Parks and Rec, and now I am 100% remote working for the federal government in another fellowship program as a presidential management fellow.
Mhm.
And so my career interests have changed. Like I'm still obviously interested in federal government. I'm here in the federal government working, but my plan is for my career to continue to focus and find an office that has an international aspect. So I'm actively networking with people in like Department of Labor. They have an international affairs office that works with APEC, the Asian Pacific Economic Corridor, and just other agencies, because State Department is not the only one that focuses internationally. Most exec agencies in the federal government have an international office. You might have to look deeper on the website to try to find them, but if you Google like international plus the agency name, you'll find that office for the most part. So my career aspirations have changed slightly, that I'm not just focused on the State Department as a future career move, but I'm still very much interested in like international affairs, trying to use my Mandarin language skills and other knowledge of Asian cultures. So
Excelsior program is a great program. We just went through the recruitment process for the next cohort, so we're really excited about that. Yeah, glad it was good. Mohammed?
Okay, so for me, so I actually knew exactly what I wanted to study and where I wanted to end up be. In fact, when I wrote my whatever called letter to the school of why you want to enter, you know, I said I want to work for the United Nations, and I just want to prepare myself for that. So I came and I did my master's degree in public administration because you know, I used to work actually at some point for the government of Jordan. I was at the Ministry of Planning there, and I interacted a lot with the United Nations on development. And that's when my passion for the UN's work in general just came to fruition. And through an interaction with a senior person at the time at the UN, I realized that that's where I want to be. Like, that's exactly the type of work I want to do. So I came to Rockefeller because also it was in close proximity to New York, and it was at my time, I think it was ranked 4th or 5th in the MPA programs. I mean, it was really amazing. And you know, I made sure that I actually choose specific electives that would open the skill set that I need at the UN, whether in public financial management, whether in public economics, even the data stuff, and the statistics, etc. So I really focus on that. And then I did land a job at the United Nations a month before I graduated from Rockefeller. That was in 2008. And of course, I mean, it was a you know, great to be inside the institutions, but it's also been a while where I continued to grow within the organization and more specialize. But every single specialization and or progression I've had at the UN, it's been really built on the concrete skills that I gained through my education at Rockefeller. And I actually have not changed that. So, you know, the focus sometimes, or the sectors, or the type of work might change, but the strength, what you bring into the job, actually still is maintained and is the same. So that's it from my side.
Thank you so much. Very insightful. Patrick, we'll go to you next, and then there are some questions in the chat, so we'll go to those questions after.
Awesome, thank you. So I have 2 questions. My first being specifically for Madeleine. I'm very interested in fellowships. I think shorter term work is a lot more better suited for my wandering eye in the workplace. But How have you sort of developed, and again, if this is too personal, don't worry about answering it. How have you really cemented and developed yourself as a financially secure individual while jumping from job to job? How have you found security in your living situation, and your finances?
That's a very good question. Did not anticipate that at all. But that's really important. So for me, the main reason why I chose Rockefeller is I could afford it on my own income that I had previously saved up, and I could live for free with extended relatives. So I went to Rockefeller and was able to get through that program financially safe. And then for 2.5 years, I worked in New York State government, and I mean, I'm not a major spender for the most part, so I was able to kind of like just kind of set money aside while having an income. And as an Excelsior Service Fellow, you come in at a higher level in New York State government than like entry level, so you have a decent salary, to be honest. And that salary increases by $5,000 every year. And so so you get a really good salary for having a master's degree and coming in like mid-level in New York State government. And I didn't have any debt either, so that's good on my side. I didn't have to worry about paying off lots of loans or anything. But yeah, you're getting a really good salary as an Excelsior Service Fellow. And then my current position, it's federal government, it's decent salary and lots of really good benefits. So I mean, yeah, you have to think about the benefits, insurance and health and all of that. New York State government has really great benefits as well as the federal government. So that's another way you kind of like save money because you get all those really great benefits. But yeah, you have a really good salary for Excelsior Service Fellow. Does that help answer your question?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think you did it right, and it's inspiring. Okay. And then more so for the entire crowd, and obviously Madeleine, you're still welcome to join in the conversation, but we've talked a lot about like obscurity in our sort of field of work and generalism. Have you found it better in your experience to market yourself more as a specialist or a generalist, and where has that helped? Where has that been possibly detrimental in interviews and the process of getting work?
That's a good question. I'll go first. Short answer, I don't, or I didn't. I view things from the perspective, and as I was building myself and still continue to build myself, it's less like, where do I want to be? And like, am I a specialist or a generalist? And more, what are the skills that I am trying to cultivate? And what am I bringing to the table to be enticing for an employer? In my role, so we change positions every couple of years, right? So I'm in my second tour. I'm doing a protection tour, but after this, I'll go overseas. But none of those positions are given. You have to bid and you have to advocate for those. And so as I bid and as I advocate for my next position, which I'm starting to do now, that is the mentality that I take in. This is what I can offer you, and this is what I am looking to get out of the experience. And for me, that's been super beneficial because you're broadcasting, this is what I have to offer, but then you're also fostering buy-in from the person that you want, you want them to hire you. So you need to give them skin in the game. You have to help create that picture for them. So just another way to think about it and look at it.
It also, I think everything that TJ said is true, and I think that varies by profession. So I think if I could fit into your conceptualization in the beginning, I could market myself more as a generalist because international relations and public administration have such a broad swath of possible careers that I could market myself more as that, and then pick and choose the things that interested me, whatever they may have been. Over time, I think based on my career, I became a specialist. So immigration is my specialty now, and civil society development is less so one of my specialties. So if we wanted to talk immigration law, whether that was adjustment, naturalization, or now specifically asylum and refugee law, we can talk very specifically about those things. However, that mattered more when I was an officer, and it mattered a little bit more when I was a supervisor, but I'm a manager now. And so the skills that I'm developing in this role is, you know, these skills are different. And so I've become, in a way, another generalist, right? I can be plugged into another managerial position because the things that I'm offering, to TJ's point, and the things that they're getting from me are not just the substantive legal knowledge anymore. And it is also my ability and skills in terms of managing people, managing resources, and those kinds of things within an office and within a program. And then looking more long-term, you know, managing interagency relationships with, for instance, the Department of State. We manage those relationships. We manage relationships with ICE and CBP. Those are people that I interact with on a daily basis. So I think it can change throughout your career, right? I came in general, got specialized, and now I think in some sense you could see me as general again. But I think you have to, it's not a one or the other all the way through.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So we do have another question in the chat. You guys have maybe touched on this a little bit, but James asks, outside of Rockefeller, were there any skills or certifications that helped you in your careers?
Maybe I can come on this one. So absolutely,
Sure.
I mean, learning doesn't stop, right? You got to work on yourselves. As the colleague said before, it's not really about, you know, you're not going to start with a specialization. It's the set of skills that's going to start to shape you, and eventually you will specialize. Eventually you become an expert or a reference point, or even international recognized for something, right? That is unique to what you're bringing to the table. So in that context, I mean, there are a few things that I continue to work on. Number one, it was really an issue of passion for like specific topics that I thought are critical for development. I wanted to address them. And here I'm talking about, for example, gender equality and women's economic empowerment was really something that I thought I would really benefit more if I learn more about it. So I started to in-depth my knowledge more and more in this, getting certain classes, certifications. Same thing when came to program management and financial management programs and functions. So this is not to do with public management or etc., but this is really how you manage your own, let's say, programs or you know, etc. So got more certifications there too. And then of course, you know, part of the job, and I think Simone can testify, you know, when you end up being a manager, you're managing big teams, big chunks of money. You're also, you know, subject to audit. You're subject to many things. So you also have to improve your skills in terms of public transparency, how to deal with, you know, audit compliance issues. So getting license or certification in there also helped a lot. And then the last thing is, you know, everything in this world right now is digital too. So you really also have to, you know, stay abreast of the technologies out there. And in my job, you know, I depend heavily on new technologies to have better manage investments and transactions and communications with investors and clients and banks, etc., about infrastructure projects, taking photos and videos of progress of things on through phones and apps, etc., so you can increase transparency. So all of that, you have to kind of learn it and stay abreast of it. The learning doesn't stop. And my next endeavor is I'm already knowing, you know, okay, I need to maybe sign up for a French class. So I do understand French, but I can't speak it. And there's more and more work happening for me in West Africa. So it doesn't end, you know, so you have to continue that path over.
Anyone else want to jump in on this one?
I'll say one quick thing. So I learned in state as well as in federal, there's like an endless supply of training resources that you will have access to. It depends on your office's budget, of course, but I took a lot of training in person and webinars in New York State government, and I'm going to be doing some like public management training here in my current position. So yeah, like Mohammed said, like you'll continue to learn. There's lots of opportunities. You just kind of have to take advantage of it whenever you come into whichever level of government you're interested in.
It definitely requires a little bit of the initiative on your end once you're working to continue your professional development. Anyone else before we jump to the next question?
And just one thing I'll kind of tag in on right there is, especially earlier in my career, I never wanted to be the type of person that was like, oh, I don't know how to do that. Maybe go ask somebody else. And so it's kind of a little bit of a hustle mentality. But, you know, if you get asked to do something and you can take 10 to 15 minutes to figure out if you can kind of Google it and figure something out and see if you can develop a skill set. People and employers in particular, you know, really value that sort of resiliency. If you can be in my industry, we call it fire and forget, right? Hey, I need you to go take care of this task right now. And it happens to me all the time. I may not know, you know, where something is or how to do something specific, but I'm going to figure it out. And so if you can be resilient in that sort of way, that's a major unfair advantage that you'd want to have.
Excellent. Yeah.
There's a question from Shay that I'm very interested in responding.
I was good. That's where I was going to go next. So you read my mind. That's a great question.
Look, I mean, if I can just take a few minutes, I think there will be a lot of changes. And I have actually provided this feedback to a number of colleagues, professors, and even the new dean at Rockefeller. I perceive and I think that it's not just the issue of international development and public relations will change. I think the whole concept of public administration is going to change very soon. And let me give you some insights from my humble view to where these changes are going to be and where the current, you know, students here, I mean, if they actually invest some time into these topics, I believe they will probably be the kind of first pioneers in you know, very soon among a new areas of you know, doing business that doesn't exist. And this is where the issue of the private sector, the private finance is going to mingle with public finance. And this is where public management, as we know it, is going to have to be mingled with private management. There is not enough capital out there, you know, to meet the infrastructure needs or the urbanization. So the big role for the private sector to come in and big role for private capital to start to work with public capital for infrastructure investments, for revenue generating investments. These are public-private partnerships. These are special purpose vehicles and mechanisms and financing mechanisms that are going to change how things are governed. They're going to change how decisions are taken, whether from local government perspective or a municipal perspective or a governorate perspective or a state perspective. So, you know, doing business as it used to be, where it's, you know, how the public budget is drawn and is just completely absent and silent from the leveraging of private capital in it and what does it mean for public financial management is finished. And I think that the world is moving now to a new, maybe recognition that the current financial architecture has not worked. And, you know, and there is severe lack of, let's say, collaboration, cooperation, and missed opportunities here among both. So I do see the next phases of the public administration, for example, cohorts and courses to have very specific aspects in terms of, you know, public financial management, private sector partnerships, you know, SMEs development, access to finance, access to commercial finance. How can governments start to think as entrepreneurs rather than bureaucrats? You cannot afford to just stay as a bureaucrat anymore. You actually have to think as an entrepreneur. You need to know how to manage funds, but access funds and grow the funds. Because in reality, you can't just continue to increase taxes on people, right? So you have to find alternatives, ways to generate revenue. So own source revenue is going to become a challenge for you. How can you start to save money just by switching to climate and clean energy, for example, transitions? So if your fossil fuel bill costs you $2 billion a year, switching to clean energy might save you $1 billion. So now how can I invest that billion? We call it a savings model. So I can then partner with a private capital, with the private, for example, institutions and leverage more money. That's where I see the new generation of public administration going to be. Oh.
Excellent. And just to reiterate this, fantastic. Anyone else who wants to dive in, we'd love to hear it. And to reiterate the question, it is, how do you guys see international relations and public relations changing in the future?
I mean, I'll give you, in this case, pretty, immigration specific answer. I think when I started with asylum 12 years ago, or excuse me, when I started with immigration 12 years ago, asylum was sort of this sleepy agency, and people only confused us the general public confused us with, the mental health care asylum. And now we're every day on the news, and things happen sometimes on the news as we're working, and things will change in the moment. I remember not too long ago, we had one ruling from the Supreme Court on Monday. It was it hadn't gone to Supreme Court yet. We had one ruling on Monday. It was stayed on Tuesday, and on Wednesday went back and it was remanded. And so then we had to our people had to figure out anything that came through. We had to make sure that we applied the law that was applicable on the day that the case was adjudicated. And so you got it on Friday, you're looking, you had to make sure, was it Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday that this decision was made? And I think that is representative, at least in terms of immigration. I don't think we're going back. I think asylum, the refugee corps, and the work that we do in our international affairs, in our IRAP program, I think are not going back. I think will remain in the public eye. And so a lot of the things that sort of just happened and just continued, you were able to come in and do your job. A lot of it is impacted by external forces. I think a lot of what Mohammed was talking about in terms of country, the large amount of inequality internationally has a very direct impact on what's happening right now. Our officers and our supervisors, they're all affected by what's happening at the southern border. It affects so much of what we do. And then also, thinking about our partners here who are at the Department of State, the number of times that we're having to reach out to them to get information and verify, everything has simply increased. And I think that that's a function of the nature of the interplay between politics and what we're doing here in the supposed fourth branch of government.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Anybody else before we move on? I do want to move on to a question that Colleen had, and that I've actually had in my original questions that I think is relevant. And I see that Simone answered it for one of the students in the chat partially, but what tips or advice would you have for students as they're seeking and applying for full-time jobs and internships in international affairs, in terms of how can they stand out in the application process, the resume process, the interview process?
If I can come on this one, and this is a really important topic. And I even at one point I wanna work with Rockefeller on maybe getting some sort of example template sent out that maybe can help. And I can even share my CV with you, not for sharing with everyone, but to just get some synopsis, and then you can maybe translate some of it to the template. Look, in the United Nations, and that's a tip I also received before I even applied to the UN through previous contacts that I had. It has to be detailed. This one-page resume doesn't work for us, right? So my resume is, I don't know, I think it's almost close to 18 pages now, right? I have no clue how long it is, but it is long. And you really need to demonstrate, why. In every job you've held, you've had that certain experience, and how and for what. And you really have to elaborate. The person that is going to read your CV, and this is, I'll tell you, I'm a recruiter, this is what happens in the system. There are three things that usually happens in an application to the United Nations. There are general questions. You think they are general, but they are actually automatic filtering of people. So if you start to, and usually we're like, oh, do you have experience in this? Yes or no. So if you say no, you're just automatically just zoomed out, the kind of from the process, right? So they're looking for the yeses. Number two, they're looking actually for some quick examples of how you meet those minimum criteria, right? So taking those general questions seriously is an important step, because human resources usually filter those first. Then it comes to another body that will actually look at the technical application. And in there, there's usually a paragraph where you have to write, why do you think, you're applying for this job? A lot of people literally write sometimes CCV. You know what happens to those applications? They're just overlooked. Nobody is going to look at that. No one is going to look at your CV yet at that stage, right? So a lot of people actually, those people who spend time to write and tailor make why you think you're best person for this job. And if you convince the person who's reading it, they will send you to the shortlist, right? Then there was a committee that's now shortlisting. So from the 3,000 people who applied, now is down to like 40. And they will take the time and read everything. So now, it's international competition here. Why are you really the best? So this is why people spend time on their CV to explain why they are the best. And really, the people will read the 40 CVs. So because it's now cut from God knows how long it was. And I'm telling you that the 1.5 pages don't work. They never survive it. So you need to start to elaborate more. I remember a few colleagues that from Rockefeller, Rob, I hired him. He was my staff for a year and then went to DFC. I remember when he was applying, he shared with me his CV. I'm like, what is that? I mean, I will wrap a sandwich with that one. Go ahead in detail, right? Start writing why you think you're the best person. Why, what did you do here? Explain to me here. So that's my advice to you. Go detail, take it seriously, and tailor your CV to the job.
I think it's the first time I've ever heard it phrased in that way. I appreciate that, Mohammed. It brings up a good point. I think sometimes for students, I definitely want to hear from the other panelists. I think sometimes from students, it can be intimidating to hear like 18 pages because they're still developing that experience, but there's absolute truth to that. And what I try to articulate to students is that you are gaining experiences in a variety of capacities that are relevant, not just from jobs or internships, although those are extremely valuable, but also from research experiences, academic experiences, fellowships, clubs, even leadership experience that I'm sure is valuable. I know in certain positions, even the volunteer work carries a lot of weight too. So I'm trying to encourage students, like you can still build upon it in those capacities, but I certainly want to hear the rest of the panelists and their thoughts as well.
Part of this, I think, is like the quality for us. I put in the chat that my agency won't accept your resume if it's longer than 5 pages. So you want to be really selective about what that information is. And so I'm totally in line with Mohammed on the detail, but you're going to want to select what it is that you're highlighting. And to the extent that you're in an agency that uses USA Jobs, USA Jobs and OPM, it's a gatekeeper. Right? They're specialists in human resources, but I made a sort of tongue-in-cheek comment that they don't know the difference between a GS9 environmental specialist in the EPA from a GS9 asylum officer, but for what we put out there in terms of the job announcement. So it's AI, it's bots. They're looking for words, particular things to get you in there. And so if you do have, Mohammed's 18-page resume or CV in this instance, right? The difference between the CV and the resume, you should also know, right? If you do have that experience that you can't put it in those 18 pages, it's target your resume to reflect what USA Jobs is looking for, and then bring in that other experience into the interview. You can put that also, USA Jobs also offers you the opportunity to add a cover letter. So if you want to talk about something that's not, immediately evident in your resume, that's another opportunity. And then of course, like I said, in the interview, but I think it varies. So not all agencies are this way. And that rule for 5 pages, I think, came in because we were getting resumes that were extensive and it was taking our hiring managers quite a bit of time to get through those resumes with the volume of people who were applying as well.
Absolutely. Yes,
I think,
yep.
Yeah, sure. I think generally speaking, if you're applying for a position that say requires testing, like many many of the positions at the Department of State require you to go through a selection process, whether you're trying to become an FSO, a foreign service officer, or an HR specialist or a diplomatic security special agent, right? You're going to have to pass some level of entry level test and exam. And I would just say, take the time, you can get, there are different methodologies, right? If you want to go in blind on your first one just to see what it's like, that's cool. Like you can do that, but you know, it's probably in your best interest to spend 30 minutes or an hour or maybe more if you deem it necessary doing research into the organization that you want to work for and understanding what the core objectives of that organization are. And you know, if you get through that that initial test and you're invited to an interview at the Department of State, let's say, understanding what the 12 dimensions are, understanding how your experience fits into those and how you're going to market yourself, because you only have so much time to make an impact. And you know, you might be the first or last or one of 20 people that the board talks to that day. I sat on a hiring panel a couple of months ago, right before I was in our Los Angeles office prior to my current assignment. And gentleman walks in, very impressive. He'd spent 6 years as an Army Ranger, spoke 3 languages, had a master's degree from you know, a very prestigious university, and didn't understand what the 12 dimensions were and didn't know how to market himself the right way. And so he's a great candidate for something, but it wasn't to become a diplomatic security special agent, you know? So yeah, take the time, understand what you're applying for, do the research, and it'll show.
Absolutely. Madeleine, you want to jump in, or we can move on to the next one? That's okay.
Everything they said was great.
I couldn't agree more. It's very true. When you're applying to these positions, you're trying to, you know, really prove to these employers why you're invested in these opportunities. So I've heard that time and time again. Thank you all. I want to ask a question as we kind of near the end of the session. So I'll ask a final question, but certainly if students have any final questions, I want to open up the floor for that too. So as I'm asking this question, feel free to put that in the chat or raise your hand. What did you learn most about what, you know, working in the field of international affairs or public administration? You know, what did you learn the most throughout your career? What was surprising? What was not? I know it's a broad question.
I used to teach bureaucratic politics at Rockefeller. And one of the things that I loved about teaching that course was, you know, I would ask the students to do a capstone at the end on a particular agency, and they would learn about that agency from beginning to end and then present on the agency throughout. And one of the things I used to always say when I was teaching is, like, you know, bureaucrat shouldn't be a dirty term, right? Like, that should not be a dirty word. It is important work that bureaucrats do, and they're really important. And people would inevitably bring up this issue of red tape, and because that's what comes up when you think about bureaucracy and work in the fourth branch, right? But coming into the positions, I have to say that it has been a completely different experience teaching it and talking about it and guiding students through a capstone on it to living some of it. Where, you know, some of the frustrations of, we could really do this well, and we could really rock this if we could just do this. And then there's a whole host of reasons that are not movable that prevent us from being able to do that. At the same time, it matched what I would encourage the students, which was to say that there are really great people working in bureaucracy, and they, at that time it's a they, right? And now it's a we. I watch people day in and day out do incredible things to move within the boundaries, that the constrictions that we're forced to work in sometimes, and to really do that to the benefit of our stakeholders. And I think that is the biggest takeaway for me in working in government, is that despite all the things, and sometimes it's in spite of, and sometimes it's because of, in the end, I think it's the people that really make a difference, because the people who really care about public administration and being a civil servant, or in the case of the non-governmental partners that we have as external stakeholders, they really do understand the work of the humanitarian work that we do.
I can go. I can go next.
Excellent.
So look, from my side, and I actually wrote an article. I just never published it. Just didn't have the time. My humble thing I want to share with you here is, and what I learned the most so far. And if I just want to reflect back, don't let anyone tell you to think outside the box. I want to like shock you like that. The truth is that is the biggest limitation to you and for everyone around you, because in reality, there is no box. And someone is just trying to box you and asking you to think outside it. Sometimes the problem is within the box that you're trying to ignore now and think outside it. And sometimes it is outside it, but how far the reach. And sometimes they're just integrated, interrelated kind of building blocks and relationships where you have to kind of explore one by one to find your solution. So the reality is there is no box. And so stop thinking outside it. It is really a big limitation. We live in a world that is so interconnected, that is so global, and your today's problem is a problem everywhere. So, and it's not just unique to you. What happens here affects everyone else out there. If the US dollar falls just a little bit, big economies will collapse everywhere and people's lives will just get destroyed. So you have to understand that we are kind of, we live in a web of interrelations. So you need to keep your mind always be open to adjusting, to open to, have openness in itself and not be closed and live in a bubble. So no, think creatively, challenge your questions. Sometimes you have to challenge yourself while you're sitting, sometimes from far. So that is what I think I can say. And it is something that there was Professor Rob Portal, I'm not sure if he's even around anymore, that one time challenged me during class on something, and he just kept saying, why? And I was answering, he's like, why? And I was like, giving him another answer. He's like, why? And then I was like, what do you want? And he's like, nothing. I actually don't know the answer, but see how many versions have you just come up with it? And that's really where this idea, I realized that there's no limitation to a human mind. The only limitation you have is when you start to put yourself in a box and you start to think outside it. There's no box. Just think.
It's amazing. I've never heard that, but I really appreciate it. Amazing. Anyone else? Any final thoughts, questions?
Shall I publish the paper or?
I was gonna say, I would think a lot of people would have read it. Yeah.
All right.
We do have one more question here. So we'll kind of conclude with this and then we'll wrap up. And if you guys have any final thoughts, we'll be happy to hear it. So Ivana asks, what are ways, areas of study, internships, etc., that each of you would recommend for someone to get the experience needed for your field? As we hear that often from students as I'm struggling to kind of break into it and, they're asking for experience. How do I get that experience? It's a great question.
Simone, go ahead.
My answer is brief, so I'll make it quick. I did an internship while I was still at Rockefeller. Use the fact that you're in graduate school, because the UN one, you have to still be in a graduate program. It unfortunately meant that they could not hire me. So think about that too. But in terms of building my experience, I was able to do the internships at the United Nations before graduating because I was still in a graduate program. Go ahead, TJ. Sorry to jump in.
No, that's okay. Mine is rather brief as well, and I'm sure many people won't like it. Spend time working in the service industry. You will learn about people and yourself very quickly in a very invaluable way. And I say that a little tongue in cheek, but mostly very serious. The skills that I gained as a server and a bartender continue to serve me well through the years and through today. But in terms of something a bit more structured and academically focused, if you have an interest in government, get involved at any level you can. And even if you think, oh, well, I want to be a foreign service officer, or I want to go, I want to work for one of the federal agencies or state agencies, if you can get an intern with your, state assemblyman or, your state rep, just get your name out there, start building experience. And if that fails, get it anywhere you can. Again, think more holistically about the skills that you're trying to develop. the jobs will come, the experiences that you want will come, but just be open to new experiences that maybe fall outside of, you know, what you initially thought that you wanted. Trust me, there's time, you're gonna make it, but it might just take a little while.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Any final thoughts or questions from the students? All right, well, I want to wrap up by saying we did have a student ask, is it okay to share emails? I see some of the panelists are sharing their emails right in the chat. We appreciate that. Of course, however you prefer students connect with you is certainly fine. But yeah, we appreciate that because I know a lot of the students following the call will maybe want to stay connected and maybe ask some more questions. So I can certainly, if everyone's open to it, share the contact information with the students who attended today as well. So I'll wrap up and close by saying thank you so much to our panelists. This has been extremely insightful, not only for the students, for me as well, being newer to Rockefeller. So thank you so much for taking the time and providing your insight. It's truly invaluable. And these kind of conversations are not only important for them to continue to understand how the field operates, but also to make strong connections with individuals like yourself. So thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And I'll go ahead and close on that. Thank you everyone for thank you to the students for taking the time to be here as well.